Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I'm going to do a review on something that is way overdue. I got this knife at Blade Show in June. That was the beginning of June, right? And it is now, I'm filming this on August 27th. So it's been a while since I got this knife. And I was so excited about it when I got it that I thought for sure I'd turn on the camera and review it, but it just hasn't happened. So here we are, we're doing it now. This is a prototype of the Avian Knives. Oh goodness, what is it called? Atlas? Is that what it's called? I'm gonna feel bad if it's not. I'm gonna look it up so that I make sure I don't get it wrong. And there's gonna be people in the comments right now, you should have looked this up before. Now we're wasting time watching you talk about this. Guess what? There's a skip button. You can just move ahead, that's fine. The Atlas, I got it right. Hey, look at me. Okay, so this is a knife that I was not even aware of really until Blade Show. I think I had probably seen some people like share posts about it and stuff. I'm in some group chats where people are talking about like what's new and what's coming out. Why does my beard look uneven? This is gonna be a fun one, guys. All right. I think I had seen like glimpses of it, but I wasn't really paying attention. I've been spending way less time on social media these days, which is great for me. I'm liking that difference in my life. But I happened to walk by the Avian Knives table in the small room at Blade Show. Great room. There's a ton of knives in there that I wanted to go and see real quick. And I think I was going to say hi to Ben from NAFS real quick or something. I told him I'd pop by his booth. And then I had left the left table for just a few minutes and I was going to head right back. And I walked by this table and I happened to see one of my buddies who was there at the show standing in front of this table. Otherwise, I was kind of moving quick. I wouldn't have even stopped. So I stopped to say hi to him and kind of peek over his shoulder. Hey, what are you looking at? And it was this. And so come to find out that this knife is incredibly unique. And they brought a couple of prototypes to the show and all of them had sold out except for this one because the other ones were first come, first serve. And I was like, I want to get one of these. How do I do it? And so what was happening was at the table, they were doing this contest. And basically, if you were the fastest to disassemble and reassemble this knife, this one that I'm holding, this was the contest knife, then you won the lottery to be able to purchase it. So you got 2 tries, and the guy behind the booth was super nice. He's the guy behind the project. I think he has a partner, but one of them. He was a really cool dude, and he showed me this is the process that you take it apart. This is how it goes back together. And that's going to become really important in this review because this knife has no tools required for assembly or disassembly. There's nothing that you touch this knife with to take it apart other than your hands. That's a weird sentence to say. So I'm just going to start saying other than your hands after things. That might be fun. Anyway, so he showed me this is the way you disassemble it. This is the way you reassemble it. And whoever's fastest, they were keeping track of everyone who tried at like, from when I was standing at the booth, it was like 20 minutes from when it was going to end the contest. So I was basically the last person to try, which was also kind of fun because it's like, all right, we'll see what happens. And sure enough, it pays off that I disassemble and reassemble knives all the time, even though all the other ones that I disassemble and reassemble, I'm using Torque's tools to do, because I won. I was the fastest. I think I was like 2 minutes and I don't remember how many seconds, but I won the chance to buy the knife, so I did. I bought it right there, and I was stoked to get it. So there's a couple of unique things happening here, and the biggest one is that there's nowhere to insert a tool into this knife. There's plenty of innuendos there for those of you who are looking for them. So that's really unique in the space of folding pocket knives, to have all of these moving parts and pieces that have to go together and have them engineered in such a way that you don't have to use tools to do it is just different, right? So we'll see if I get lazy or not. I might loop in some footage of me disassembling and reassembling this knife because it's really, really cool. If I don't do it, there are some other videos already on YouTube that show the process on this knife. I encourage you to search it and watch them, even if I do loop it in, because it's really unique that it does this, right? So that's one thing. And then beyond that, this knife is also just a design that clicked for me. So if I had been at the table and it had been like, we engineered a knife that comes apart and goes back together without any tools, but I thought the design was crap and that it wasn't executed well, I wouldn't have wanted to buy it just on the novelty of that selling point that it does that one thing, right? As interesting as that is, the knife also still has to be good for me to want it, right? So this one being a prototype, production of these is happening right now, I think, by the way. I'm not sure if the pre-order is closed or if it's sold out or what, but I think they're going to start to be available pretty soon. Anyways, this one is a prototype, and it was the personal prototype of the guy who was there running the table, one of the owners. And so this one is a hand-ground MagnaCut blade. I think on the COA, it's got the Rockwell listed. If I remember correctly, it's at like 63 Rockwell, which is great for MagnaCut specifically. And it's a nice deep hollow grind, super thin down behind the edge. And it's got multiple methods of deployment. If you're familiar with some of my favorite knives, you'll know that I love a hole for deployment because I like to middle finger flick. You'll know that I also like deployment options. I feel like it's fun to have more than one. So this has a great flipper that's low profile, works great, is hidden when it's open. That's something that speaks to me. So there's a lot of cool happening here. All right, so on top of all of that, another thing that's really, really interesting is this thing is stupid lightweight. It's a titanium frame lock, and I haven't put it on a scale. They told me the weight there, and I remember being shocked that it was as low of a number as it was. I think it's like right around 3 ounces for a titanium frame lock, and it's like a 3¼ inch blade. You can see it's a fairly slim handle this way, and the blade is hollow ground, which removes some weight, but it's extensively internally milled. It's like really hollowed out inside in a way that's impressive. It also kind of looks like an integral, which would make you think it would be heavier. It's not actually an integral. This piece, if you watch the disassembly, it comes off completely. It's kind of hinged in there. And so this is like an arm that lifts up, but it looks integral from the back, which is really cool too. And it's got these kind of windows in it. Anyway, there's a few things interesting about this knife. It comes apart and goes back together without any tools. The design is actually, it feels pretty unique. It doesn't feel like it's copying anything, and it's something that I really like, that I was drawn to aesthetically, ergonomically, etc. And it's stupid lightweight. So let's talk Ergo's carry cutting action now that I've kind of covered those like interesting points, if you will. We'll start with Ergo's. So ergonomically, this knife looks like you're supposed to hold it this way at first glance, and if you do, that feels great. But you'll notice there's also a nice flat that's even a little bit choily up here. This is the way that I hold this knife. I put my foremost finger, my pointer finger, up here onto this flat choil thing, and then I put my thumb up here for a saber grip. My other fingers follow behind into this primary kind of groove back here, and this works. I feel locked into this knife. I feel indexed. There is no jimping holding me in place, which I love. It's just Ergo's working. Love that. This blade feels super usable in this grip. I feel like I'm right up next to the edge without feeling worried that I'm going to cut myself, and it just works really, really well in that way. In a hammer grip, it still works up there, but I prefer in a hammer grip to actually choke back and not use that choil. That just feels more natural to me, the way that my hand lands on it. In a draw cut, same thing. I'm not in the choil anymore, but it feels really comfortable this way. So if I am pulling back through something, that is a totally usable grip. Feels comfortable to do so. In a reverse grip, stupid comfortable. Again, I'm not using the choil anymore. I really only use the choil in a saber grip. That's where it shines. It's where I feel like you should be choking up. Every other grip, I'm just in this main groove. All 4 of my fingers have room. I wear a medium glove, although I fill it out real well. Not mean. But it's nice in a reverse grip. Reverse grip draw cut, the least wonderful grip, but it's usable if you're making a cut this way. It's not like stupid uncomfortable or anything. It just doesn't feel like it's designed to go in your hand that way like it is in other grips. And it's probably not. Who's designing knives to go this way other than like Pacals and stuff? So yeah, it's ergonomically, I consider it a total win. The fact that it's a pretty slim handle too, and that it doesn't feel too small to use is really nice. I like, especially when I'm choked up in a saber grip, it feels just the right amount of hand filling where like I trust in this knife. But it also doesn't feel like cumbersome or too big or I don't know. It works for my hands well. I like it in that way. The one thing I'll say ergonomically that bothers me, and it'll come up in carry too, is the pocket clip just a little bit. It's not like a total deal breaker, but the pocket clip comes to a pretty aggressive point, and I'll talk about that more in carry because then it's even more bothersome. In my hand, I just feel it kind of now and then. It's kind of a point, but in pocket, it bothers me more. Anywho, let's, I guess, just jump right into carry since I'm alluding to it now. Carry on this knife is awesome in the sense that it's super slim this way. So in pocket, it just doesn't feel beefy. It doesn't feel like it's taking up a lot of room. It's also really slim this way. So in every like kind of orientation that matters in pocket, it's just really compact. On top of that, like I already mentioned, it's stupid light. It feels very feathery. So in pocket, it's like kind of a breeze. The one downfall of it, again, is just the clip, in my opinion. If they just rounded this point more than a little, but it doesn't have to be an insane amount, it would feel way more comfortable to me because that clip is just a little snaggy with that point on it. And it's one of those knives that, like, I have a 7-year-old daughter. If I'm like picking her up and stuff, or like we're watching a movie and my knife is in my pocket and like we're wrestling and tickle fighting, whatever it is that's happening, like I have to worry about this pocket clip like scratching her, or if I do the wrong thing and just run my arm past my pocket the wrong way, it can like, it's not going to cut me, but it can give you a decent scratch the way that it's kind of pointed. So if there was a piece of feedback that I would give them about this knife, that would be like the point, and it's a literal point, and it should just be rounded off, and then it would be wonderful. The other thing about the pocket clip and where it's placed and like kind of how far down the knife it is, because it's down this curve, and the construction of the clip, it's not super deep carry, but it's also not like a ton of knife sticking out of your pocket either. That's about how much you'll see there. So it's not shallow, so shallow that it bothers me. I just generally prefer knives that tuck all the way in and you don't really see them. But again, it hasn't bothered me. It's just like not exactly my preference. I don't know how they would do that though on this knife because of the way that the construction works. That like pin or whatever you want to call that, what would normally be a screw, like that piece that's going through has to kind of go through right there for this design. So it gets like a definite pass on pocket clip placement because of the clip not just being a clip, it's also part of the structure of this knife and the mechanism by which it can be assembled and disassembled without tools. So yeah, anyway, carry is like overall really good. And for a bunch of people, I bet they wouldn't even be bothered by or maybe even notice the pointiness of this clip. That's just one of those things that for me in particular bugs me. And that may be fair or may be unfair, but I'm telling the truth, it bugs me. So if that was rounded out, I think also the people who wouldn't mind it also wouldn't mind that it was rounded off a little bit more. Like, it's not going to make this clip look worse, in my opinion, to have that come to a little less of a point. Maybe it'll be slightly less aggressive or something, but in my opinion, it would be a worthy trade-off. All right, so we've talked ergos and we've talked carry. Let's talk action. So this knife, granted, I've only held this one, and this is a prototype. This is not one of the production ones, so I feel like that should be stated, probably even for the other categories as well. Maybe some changes will be made in production, I don't know. But the action on this one is fantastic. So the detent is dialed just really, really well for the flipper and also for middle finger flicking, which is kind of a tough thing to do. To dial a detent so that it feels appropriate for multiple deployment methods isn't always easy, because sometimes on middle finger flicking, you just need less detent than you do on a flipper, depending on where it's placed. And if you have too hard of a detent and the flipper's placed in a spot that doesn't agree with how stiff that detent is, then it can be such a bear to open that it's like then the flipper doesn't work well. So to balance it to where it feels like borderline perfectly dialed for both deployment options is like kudos, well done to them. I think that's a really great thing that they accomplished, because I know that it's not easy. So I love that. I think it's a nice blend between the flipper tab being up above the pivot, way up here, the flipper or the hole being placed in a spot where no matter where you get into it, it works really well and it feels crisp, even if you're down low or if you're all the way up high. Like, I do not fail deployment on this knife ever. It doesn't happen where it's like, oh, I accidentally limp wristed it and now it like did this kind of thing. You know, it's crispy. It works. And then on closure, which is the other half of how a knife's action is, runs on bearings. It's pretty droppy for how light this blade is. It also has a little bit of like a mechanical sound to it, which is kind of fun. You can like hear parts moving, which I think in some cases would almost seem like cheap on some knives, but here, because of the nature of the construction of this knife, it's kind of cool that you like hear things happening a little bit. Anyway, it closes pretty well. It's not like a Shiro where it's just like guillotine every time, or a Norseman or something. But it's pretty, I mean, once you get past the detent, it doesn't require like hard shaking. Oh, I just dropped the blade on my thumb. Luckily it didn't cut me because it was lightly, but this is hard to do for the camera. Anyway, I like it. I find that it's really fun to fidget with because I have those multiple deployment methods. If middle finger flicking is a good deployment method on a knife, then I'm gonna like the action as long as it's like dialed in well and the tolerances are good, which it is here. So action is a win. That leaves us with cutting. And I've actually done a fair bit of cutting with this knife, considering it's a prototype. Because it's in MagnaCut and it's heat treated well and it's a nice user finish, I haven't been like afraid to use this thing. Granted, it's ground really thin. It doesn't feel like a heavy duty hard use knife, being as light and thin and slim as it is. But I've used it for most of my typical things. I've used it for a good bit of cardboard. I've put it through, I think I put it through, did I put it through zip ties? I did. I remember doing it. I put it through 2 or 3 zip ties just to make sure that I felt the way that it did that, and it did just fine. A lot of like opening boxes, like the tape on top, and then a lot of packaging because we get a lot of like toys for my daughter and stuff. So this is really good at opening Barbies and LOL surprise dolls and all that fun stuff. I've put it through an apple, probably a couple apples at this point. It's done well at it. Yeah, I mean, it's done my types of cutting tasks well, and I haven't been shy about using it when I've been carrying it, and I've carried it quite a bit. So yeah, I can pretty confidently say I like the cutting performance. The real kind of interesting thing about this blade shape with this hollow grind is like the difference in thickness behind the edge depending on which part of the blade you're using. Because we've got such a straight spine up here and then a belly, we've got a really thin portion of the blade. Let me see if I can do this in a way it'll stay focused. It's really thin right here where it's got the tallest amount of that hollow grind, right? But when you get up towards the tip, the grind gets pretty thick again in a way that makes it feel pretty robust at the tip. And then it's like, yeah, depending on the height of the grind, which you can see changes depending on where you are on the blade, there's a different thinness to different thicknesses. And so when I've been passing this through cardboard, the magic is just kind of being in this like main, I don't know, inch and a half of the blade right there in that belly. Sorry, this has got to be aggravating to watch with how terribly it's focusing. I think it's the lighting in here, to be honest, right now. But anyway, it does really, really good at slicing in that kind of sweet spot. And then in the other parts, it feels a little more like I'm less worried about it. You know, like if I do put this knife through a zip tie, I'm cutting the zip tie with the section up here where it's thicker behind the edge, and I know there's a little more kind of supporting material behind it than there is if I popped it all the way down there. So I like that, the kind of varying thickness of the grind without having like a compound grind. This is a cool way to achieve that, and it just, I don't know, it works. So yeah, this is just a really interesting knife that is also executed really well. Like if you forget the fact that this knife comes apart and goes back together without any tools, which isn't like, there's not nobody else who's doing that. There's like CRKT has like their field strip, I think it's called. And then I want to say there's a hinderer that he built in. Is it like the full track or something? There's like a tool. Maybe that's, it just like carries its own tool. I don't know. It's not that no one has ever made a knife that comes apart and goes back together without any tools. But the way that this one is done is engineered in such an interesting and unique and cool way compared to the other ways that I've seen. And then it's designed really well. So the point I was trying to make is if you took away the fact that it did all that, if this was just a titanium frame lock that had Torx hardware and it was T8s everywhere to get it apart and bring it back together, but it was this design and was this light and had this action and carried the way that it does, then I would still want it. So the fact that it also does such an interesting thing is impressive to me. It's not like they're just resting on that like gimmick. Not that it's necessarily a gimmick, but it kind of is. I don't know what you would call that. They're not resting on that one point. They're not resting on the engineering of that mechanism. Instead, they're also designing a really cool knife around the way that it works. And it's nice. I love it. It's become a knife that I reach for often, especially in summer when I'm wearing shorts a lot and I'm not wanting to carry big heavy knives as often. This being so slim and so light, but still having as much blade length as it does, that it still for me is absolutely a good primary sized, but it's small enough that it can fit the role of a secondary as well, doubles its odds of making it into pocket, because sometimes it's front right, sometimes it's back left. It's got options, and I like that. I like a knife that can fill a role like this one does, where it's a knife that just like works for me and for what I carry knives to do. So anyway, I like it a lot. This is the Avian Knives Atlas. I paid for this knife. I had to win the opportunity to buy it. This is not like sponsored by Avian Knives or anything, but it's just a knife that I felt was definitely worth turning the camera on finally and sharing about, because it's different and it's new and it's exciting. And I'm pretty sure if there aren't some readily available right now, there probably will be pretty soon. One thing I should say as well, I don't know 100% what the ratio is going to be between production and custom on these. The way I understand it, they're using a production company to manufacture most of the parts, but they're also machining some of the stuff themselves. I know they at least did on the prototypes. Maybe all the components will be done by a production company, but for production, the production run, I should say. But I think within that, they are hand grinding the blades. I'm pretty sure that's something that's happening even on the production ones. The production ones won't be Magna Cut, which in the protos, I love that they did Magna Cut because now I have one. I think they're using RWL34, if I remember correctly, or something kind of in that neighborhood. So still a decent steel, but compared to this one, there will be a couple changes for production. And I think it's that more of the components are going to be done by the production company, and that like I think the only thing that's going to be done by hand is going to be the blade grind, if I'm not mistaken. But don't quote me on that. Reach out to them or look at their Instagram and see everything they've posted, and like I'm sure that they've explained it better than I just did, exactly how much is production versus what's being done by hand. Anyway, yeah, I will link down below for your convenience their website, assuming they have one up. I think they do. And their Instagram, I know they have that because I follow them there. So you can see and learn more about these and see if they still have spots for pre-order or whether they're sold out, and kind of how it's going to be to buy one and all that. But really cool knife, unique, different, and also just really good in all the ways that it's not unique and different. In the ways that it's just a knife, it's also good. So thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate you. Sorry this was a bit of a long one. I'm sure some people are going to complain that I didn't do this whole thing in 5 minutes. But here we are. Appreciate you guys, and we'll see you on the next one.